And now to our first guest. Christina Jones first developed interest in the biological sciences in her high school anatomy class. While attending Austin College as an undergraduate, she thought she wanted to be a medical doctor until she discovered the fascinating field of research. Now, Christina is pursuing a PhD in the Department of Pharmacology at UW. Outside of the lab, Christina is involved in numerous activities, including an unusual sport called underwater hockey. A couple of underwater hockey fans here. Tonight she will tell us how stem cells decide pardon me, a little bit of a typo. Tonight she will tell us that there is no fate but what you make involving stem cells. Please give a warm welcome to Christina.
Thanks, Megan, for that wonderful welcome. So today I will talk to you about my research with stem cells. So I first became interested in science, like Megan said, in my high school anatomy class, and I just was so intrigued about how our body works and how we were put together in this unique structure, and how every molecule in our body works in this orchestrated fashion to do anything from just keeping us alive to running marathons and conducting orchestras and all these amazing things that humans could do. And so I just really wanted to learn more. And so in college, I took a lot of science classes, but the more I learned about it, the more I was kind of thinking, well, we have such great bodies, but why, if our bodies are so amazing, do we have all of these problems like cancer and diabetes and heart disease and Alzheimer's, as a few examples? And so I wanted to go to grad school to not only learn about how our body works, but to hopefully find treatments to cure some of these ailments. And stem cells were interesting for that point in particular. So stem cells have shown a lot of promise in the medical field for treating some of these problems. But what exactly is a stem cell? Well, a stem cell is actually a lot like me. So in undergrad, I studied abroad in Rome, Italy, and during the experience, I got to drink wine, eat gelato every day, learn about the history of Italy, and learn all about how ancient Rome relates to the modern society. But after my time in Rome, I had the choice of either flying back home to Texas or going to Germany, since I had some time left over before I had to go back to classes. And so, even though I had some financial issues, I decided to go to Germany, because why not? It's once in a lifetime. So you might be thinking, how does my trip to Europe have to do with stem cells? Well, stem cells are kind of like Play-Doh, in the sense that they can mold and form into multiple cell types. And they, unlike most cells in our bodies that can just make copies of themselves, they actually can decide and turn into different cell types. And so they might take a path to become a heart cell, or they might take a different path to become a brain cell, just as a few examples. And we'll come back to this idea here in a bit. During development, your cells divide over and over again to become the billions of cells that make up your body. And during that process, your stem cells will at some point decide to specialize into other cell types. And once they're specialized, they stay into that cell type. So they can just make more copies of that cell type, but they can't transform into anything else. And so stem cells are kind of like superheroes in that sense, is that they can be like Clark Kent and be ordinary and just make copies of themselves, or they can also have these superpowers and make specialized cells. And when you're an adult, almost all of your cells are specialized. And all these specialized cells have different functions. So for instance, they can carry oxygen in your bloodstream, or they might help your muscles contract and relax. They might send signals from your brain to the rest of your body. But like I was saying, most of your cells are specialized when you're an adult. But actually you have stem cells working in your body right now. These act as a reservoir for the specialized cells. So if the specialized cells die, then the stem cells can replace those dead cells. So this is really important for our skin, as an example. So our skin acts as a barrier for the outside world. So there's a lot of things that would be bad to get into our body. So if we have a cut on our skin, that is an opening for all of these bad things to get into our body. And so we need a way to repair that. And so skin stem cells do that. That's part of the reason why your skin grows back. And if we didn't have that, then we would have a lot of issues. And then, so adult stem cells are also found in other parts of your body, including your gut, as well as your bone marrow. And your bone marrow can actually make 8 different types of specialized cells. Now, what's different about adult stem cells compared to other types of stem cells is that they can only become one cell type. So your skin stem cells can only become skin cells. They can't become blood cells, and vice versa. Now, these adult stem cells have already shown a lot of promise in research. So, for instance, one skin stem cell can provide enough skin to cover the entire body. And this could be really helpful in treating extensive burn victims. So, for instance, they do this by taking a part of the unaffected area and they grow it on a petri dish, or in what we call cell culture. So the cells are placed in a petri dish. A liquid is added to provide nutrients for these cells so that they can multiply and cover the entire surface of the dish. And then that layer of cells can be taken and put on the burned area. And so this is really helpful in saving lives for burn victims, but like I was saying, skin stem cells can only make skin cells. And so they can't make hair cells and sweat glands. And so you might be able to save the patient's life, but they won't necessarily have the best quality of life. Also, adult stem cells have been used in bone marrow transplants for leukemia patients to resupply their bloodstream. But bone marrow transplants can also, or bone marrow biopsies can be really painful, and to try to find a match for a bone marrow donor can also provide difficulty sometimes. So like I said, there's numerous parts of the body that have stem cells, and there might be parts that we don't know about. But we do know that there's certain parts of our body that don't have stem cells, such as your heart. So if you have damage to your heart, then your heart can't heal itself, so that you'll live the rest of your life with a heart that's not going to be able to pump as much and do as much work, so that'll cause problems. So we need another type of stem cell that can make all types of specialized cells. And here comes embryonic stem cells, which I know has been a controversy in the news, but it's really important that we use embryonic stem cells because they have this superpower to become any cell type. Now, embryonic stem cells come from when a sperm fertilizes an egg, and then that fertilized egg becomes a blastocyst, which a blastocyst is the embryo at about day 4 of development. This is right before the embryo is implanted into the uterus. And just to give you a sense of what we're working with is these blastocysts are so small that you can't see them by the naked eye. They're actually so small that they're about the same size as an eye on a dime. So these early embryos are made in the lab for fertility treatments, and if they're not used during pregnancy, they can be donated for research. And so researchers take these blastocysts, and they take this area called the inner cell mass, which is this area right here, and then they plate those in a petri dish, and hopefully if they survive in the lab, that's what becomes what's considered a stem cell line that is immortal, which means that it can stay alive in the cell in the lab indefinitely, and we can use it for lots of experiments. So coming back to this idea that embryonic stem cells can become any cell type, and they have to make these decisions to decide what type of cell they want to be. But what determines how do these stem cells decide? Well, like all of our cells in the body, stem cells get multiple signals coming in, influencing them in their decision of what they want to be. So you can use the example of me deciding if I want to go to Germany, or you can think about a teenager maybe trying to decide what they want to do with their lives. So these signals are coming into the cell, and this is what we call cell signaling. So cell signaling is actually a lot like our own spoken language, in the sense that someone is speaking words to you, and then those words are being intercepted by your ear. and then interpreted by your brain. And then your brain is figuring out what those words mean and then tells you how you can respond. And so similarly, a cell has molecules that you can consider the words of the cell, and then those interact with receptors which sit on the cell surface, and those can be considered the ear of the cell. And then those signals are transmitted within the cell to our genetic material in an area that you might consider the brain of the cell. Now, like our own language, different words have different meanings in different contexts. And similarly, different molecules can have different meanings to the cell in different situations. Also, different signals have different volumes within the cell too. You can turn, a signal might be turned up in certain situations or turned down, much like you would turn up a dial on like a stereo to hear, I don't know, a podcast or a talk show radio or something. So in my research, I'm trying to understand how stem cells decide what they want to be. So to do this, I use cell culture. So this is a picture of what stem cells would look like in a petri dish under a microscope. And so they actually look really different than most cells because they're small and they're round and they form into these clusters, unlike most cells. And so in this one cluster, you might have millions of cells. And so from there, I can manipulate and control what different signals are being turned on or turned off. And so kind of like what I was saying with the dial, I can turn it on all the way or part of the way, or maybe turn it down part of the way, and then I can add and change the conversation these cells are having. And then from there, I look at the cells and I try to understand, okay, are they turning into blood cells or brain cells or bone cells, or what cell types are they turning into? And maybe there's a combination of these cells, and maybe if I turn on one signal, they might turn into a different type of cell. And so that's the real question, is based on my treatments that I'm doing, what are they turning into? Also, I ask the same question using zebrafish. So zebrafish are a particular type of organism that are completely see-through, and they can heal almost any type of their body. So if you cut their fin, they can regrow their fin. If you cut their heart in half, they can regrow the heart. If you sever their spine, they can regrow their spine. So almost any part of the body they can regrow. And this is really cool because they use stem cells to do this. So like I was saying, stem cells are useful in development, but they're also useful in healing. And so that's what's so unique about this fish, is that they use stem cells in both development and in healing. So what I do is that I make them glow in the dark. And the way this is done is through genetics. So I can take a gene that is coded for a particular signal that I want, and then I can color it green. And then I insert that into a fish, and that fish can glow green in whenever that signal is being turned on. Additionally, I can use another fish and have a different color. So I can insert a gene for a different signal and color that red. And then I can mate those two fish together and have a fish that has red and green. And then I can watch them during development and see at what point are these signals turning on and off, or turning on, I guess. And so, like, is the green signal going to be turned on in the heart? Is the red signal going to be turned on in the spine? Or maybe they're interacting and they're both being turned on in a certain area. And so I can watch that during development. I can also, so this area might be green for that particular gene or signal, and then the other area would be red for a different signal. I can also watch this during regeneration, or the healing process, where you cut the fin and then you watch it regrow back. And then you can use the same fish and ask which signals are important during this regrowing process. And then we try to use the same tools that these fish are using to use in our own bodies to heal some of the parts that we don't have stem cells in. So just to kind of sum up how stem cells are used, they could potentially be used to combat baldness by regrowing hair. Like I was saying, they are useful in burn victims and cancer patients, as well as diabetes, because cells in your pancreas actually, in type 1 diabetes, can't produce enough insulin, so they're trying to make cells that can produce insulin again. Also, since there are so few organs on the market, they have been trying to grow organs in a lab. So they've actually successfully transplanted ears and bladders and esophaguses for people that have bladder cancer. And so they've actually cured people of bladder cancer and esophageal cancer just by replacing these body parts that they grow in the lab. So bladders are actually pretty simple to grow in the lab because they're just a sac. But more complex organs, such as kidneys and hearts, a new field of research has been coming about with 3D printing. So this works kind of like a 2D printer in like an office or your home, except for it prints layer by layer to make a three-dimensional structure. And so you can put anything in the ink cartridge. And so in this instance, they're putting stem cells in the ink cartridge, and they tell the computer, print this design, which is a kidney, and then they try to print it, and then hopefully make a functional organ. But it's a new field of research, and they're doing a lot of groundbreaking stuff with it. Also, like I was saying, if you have a damaged area of your heart, they've been trying to make a kind of a stem cell band-aid for that damaged area, where you put stem cells on the affected area, and then hopefully it'll heal the damaged tissue and be functional again. And they've done a lot of trying to find different ways to use those in the hearts and trying to make stem cells more efficient for this process. And also stem cells have been shown a lot of promise with Alzheimer's research, and so this picture in particular is the left side is a healthy brain, and then the right side is an advanced Alzheimer's brain. And so as you can see, the right side is very small and kind of ugly looking and diseased-like, and so they've been trying to make the right side look like the left side and hopefully have more memory and function back to the brain. So ideally, we're trying to get to the point where we can have personalized medicine, or like a stem cell depot, where you go to the doctor and you say, I have a particular ailment, and then the doctor can make a treatment specialized just for you. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you for everyone that came to listen to my talk. I'd like to say thanks to my family. My younger brother actually told me recently that he wants to be a scientist, so it's really exciting. I've been doing a lot of fun experiments with him. I'd like to say thanks to my advisor, Randy Moon, to allow me to work in his lab, and all of my lab mates for giving me a lot of guidance throughout this process. Also, I'd like to thank Engage for giving me this great opportunity to take this class about communicating science and allowing me to talk here. And I'd also like to thank Town Hall for giving me this great venue to talk at. So I'd like to open the floor to questions, and please use the mics.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
I'm a friend of hers, and I play water hockey. So you mentioned that you can turn the dial up or down to create different types of cells. Do you do that chemically or with like vibrations or sing into it with your Madonna headpiece that you got?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so I either use drugs or genetic manipulations to turn signals on or off. And so these signaling events are it's like a whole conversation. And so we have to pick a certain part of that conversation to control. So we want to turn certain words up or down, kind of thing.
Hi. So when you're growing a bladder, say, are you taking stem cells from the patient who has the problem, or are you using embryonic stem cell? How are you doing this so they don't have, graft versus host disease?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think those studies that they actually transplanted, I think were with pig stem cells, and I don't think that I know that they were rejected, but I know that they've been trying to get to the point that they want to use your own cells. And I didn't actually mention this, but there are stem cells that are able to reprogram, which means that they can take your samples from your skin or your urine, and they can do a lot of modifications to those and change them back into like a stem cell state, and then they can take those stem cells and make them whatever they want to be. but those are not as efficient as embryonic stem cells, and so a lot of people have been doing a lot of research in that to try to eliminate the rejection of organ transplants, but we're trying to get them to the point that they're just like embryonic stem cells, and so that's why we're still using embryonic stem cells, because they're the gold standard for differentiation. Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Is it correct that we, as adults, don't have any of the embryonic stem cells that can, so is all your talk and research is about getting the stem cells from elsewhere and having it work in us? Do you see it at any point somehow us getting the embryonic stem cells that we can somehow control ourselves rather than having to go someplace to get it? Is there some way to implant such in us that we could use?
Yeah, so so you can actually, what they've been doing with a lot of these, like I was saying, injecting stem cells into hearts, or using like a heart or stem cell band-aid, where they kind of make like a sheet of stem cells and they put it on the heart. So those are actually transformed a little bit to become what we call progenitor cells. So they're they still have the potential to become multiple types of cells, but they're not stem cells in the sense that they can become like skin cells or brain cells or anything like that.
But at this point, it's not the individual who's deciding what those cells become. It's you on the outside deciding that.
Yeah.
Implant.
Yeah. So ideally, you want to implant these cells, and then your body take over and turn them into heart cells. So the idea is, like, if you inject stem cells into the heart, then hopefully the other heart cells around it will tell it to be a heart. And so that's kind of the idea, and we're not quite there yet, but that would be hopefully in the future. Yeah.
Do we know why the heart or other organs don't have stem cells? Like, is there some evolutionary reason that?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
This question is about neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's, dementia, multiple sclerosis, anything that affects functioning of astrocytes and neurons in general. So the nervous system, peripheral, and the central nervous system. So how would stem cells help in this area?
So what he's referring to is neurodegeneration, which means that your brain cells are dying. And astrocytes are these cells that are basically the immune cells of your brain. And so in Alzheimer's disease and a lot of these neurodegenerative diseases is that the brain cells are dying. And so that's what we're trying to replenish those dying cells, because there's certain parts of your brain that don't have stem cells, and so we're trying to kind of like create a reservoir so that they can replace those dying cells.
Certain neurons and our astrocytic cells can be regenerated, but once they degenerate, there's all kinds of astrogliosis and other types of bad behavior happening, so the cells don't function correctly.
Yeah.
How can we use stem cells to address that problem? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure as far as that in particular, because I know the brain is highly complicated. I mean, there's electrical signals coming in, there's chemical signals coming in, there's tons of different types of cells in your brain that are all working together, and so,
Right.
like you were saying, it's super complicated. And Alzheimer's disease, like they sometimes they can form these plaques or these like kind of solid bodies that, it would be really hard to get rid of those just by using stem cells.
Right. You need. I'm aware that they're using zinc, or depending on how much zinc is being transported intraneurally and extraneurally, you need not too much and not too little. And Alzheimer's patients and other patients have a depletion or too much or something not going, so neurotransmission is not happening
Right.
correctly. And there's a lot of phosphorylation, oxidative stress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also.
Right. So yeah. So the actual so I actually study a particular type of signal that it controls a lot of other signals, and so the idea is that if you can find a signal that controls a lot of other signals, then hopefully, if you manipulate that one signal, then hopefully you can
Right. So
help all the other signals, and then hopefully if you add stem cells to a particular brain region, then hopefully they'll develop into the right type of connection and function properly.
are the stem cells inserted into a gene, or how does it work?
I don't actually know as far as when the cells are actually injected into the tissue, like from there and how they turn into cells. That's what we have no idea.
Right. But it's the future.
Yeah, it is the future. And I mean, the idea is that like it doesn't really matter how it works as long as it works, right? And so it's like if we that's what we're trying to figure out is like because it doesn't work, and so that's why we're trying to figure out why it doesn't work. And so we're trying to make better ways to make stem cells in a dish, and then hopefully it can translate into putting it into a body.
Yeah, but there are so many molecules that we have to address.
For sure.
Okay.
Thanks for giving a great talk. It's a very interesting topic, and a lot of people are very interested in it. I think it's largely because there's so much hope, and that hope sometimes creates premature enthusiasm. And it seems like we all have diseases like dementia, arthritis, heart disease, and we'd love to have cures. In our lifetimes, what do you think would be the first 3 or 4 things? You mentioned clinical application in burn victims. Actually being used for substitutes for skin grafts, I take it. So what do you think would actually be the first application for stem cells in clinical practice?
I think one of the biggest things nowadays is sequencing your entire genome. And so I think because it's getting cheaper and cheaper, I think that is the next thing. And so I think it's like we're getting closer and closer to this personalized medicine idea like I was talking about, where you could go into the doctor's office and sequence your entire genome and then say like, oh, I have defects in these certain areas, and like maybe it might make me susceptible to certain diseases. And like the more we're learning about genetics, the more we're learning about these diseases and how it's happening. And so hopefully getting to the idea that we can tailor all of our treatments to each individual, because right now a lot of these treatments, like yes, they might work for some people, but they don't work for other people, and so you can't just like blanket treat a population of people. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing in the medical field right now. As far as the next, you said 3 things?
So if we accomplish that,
Yeah.
what would be the
First treatable disease. I mean, there's so many diseases. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like everyone always talks about cancer, but like cancer has so many different types of cancer, right? So you can't really treat it as one disease. And so I think there's a lot of diseases that are out there that are like that. Like we think we've defined them in the right way, but they're actually like 20 diseases within the one.
it's still too far away to make a prediction?
Yeah, I don't think I could make one sole prediction on what disease in particular. All right, great, thank you.